זמרו לאדוני בכינור, בכינור וכל זמרה, זמרו לאדוני בכינור וכל זמרה. אדוני בכינור, בכינור וכל זמרה, זמרו לאדוני בכינור וכל זמרה.
Page 137 with the words of Adonai Oz. Adonai Oz, le'amo ייתן Adonai יברך את עמו. Adonai Oz, le'amo ייתן Adonai יברך את עמו. Welcome the words of the Shabbat bride with the Chadodi on page 138.
דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת, לקבלה, התעוררי, התעוררי, כי בעורר, קומי אורי, אורי אורי, שיר דמרי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. דרך דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת, לקבלה. דרך דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת, לקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי, בית אדוני תריצי, על יד איש ורבצי, ונשמחה ונגילה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת, לקבלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת, לקבלה. בואי ושלום, עצרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמונה עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת, לקבלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת, לקבלה. יאללה ניי ניי ניי, 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 יאללה ניי ניי. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת, לקבלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, בני שבת, לקבלה.
Shkoch, please remain standing as we invite Rena forward to both read on page 119 and to continue with the blessing for the Shabbos Licht.
As these candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Amen.
Good Shabbos. Please take this occasion to wish good Shabbos to those seated all around you. I'd like to welcome those not only in the Beit Knesset this evening, but the many who are at home watching via our live stream. Please be seated.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון.
כי שימחתני אדוני בפועליך, במעשה ידיך רנן. מה כתוב מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. איש בנו ידע, וכסיל לא יבין את זאת.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. צדיק אתה מעיפה, כארץ בלבנון, בלבנון יזכה, שתולים בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו. עוד ינון בשיבה, ישנים ברעננים יהיו, להגיד כי ישר אדוני צורי ולא עוולה תבוא.
We'll now turn to page 142 with the words of Shalom Aleichem.
שלום עליכם מלאכי השרת, מלאכי עליון. מי מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. בואכם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון. מי מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ברכוני לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון. מי מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. צאתכם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון. מי מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
And now we will rise for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144.
אמן. בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב, אמן. וישמר אבא מבורך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך. בריחו תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה. אמן.
seated. We continue now on page 148, working on our Hebrew a little bit together as we read in unison, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, bechokma poteach she'arim, uvitvuna meshane itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umesader et hakochavim, b'mishmeroteim barakia kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or. Uma'avir yom u'mevi layla, u'mavdil ben yom u'ben layla, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam, tamid jimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, ha'ma'ariv aravim.
שוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו, איך ימינו ובהם נגי יומם ולילה, נגי יומם ולילה, ואהבתך תעשי ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Shema Yisrael, page 152.
ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד, שם כבוד, מלכותו לעולם ועד.
We join together.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל, ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף בציר תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים לקהיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
In a moment, we'll sing as we do each Shabbat and each day the Shirat Hayam, the portion Michamocha, which is so popular. The liturgist Mark Nazimova has written a piece entitled Geula, Redemption, which I share with you in anticipation of our singing tonight. He wrote, "The Israelites walked into the sea 1 foot at a time. What were they thinking about as the water rose up their legs, chilling their hearts, advancing toward their open mouths? We continue to walk here and now, 1 foot at a time, on our better days, walking forward. Alone, I cannot reach the far shore without drowning. Somehow I don't go under. The person to my right holds me up. Something I cannot see holds him up. And so we give blessing to the source of our help, help so often unexpected as we step forward into a vast sea of uncertainty." Please join with Ido and with Sharon as we join on page 158.
Ya bam bam bim bidi bam, ya ba bam bam bim bam. Ya bam bam bim bidi bam, ya ba bam bam bim bam. Ya na 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 na, ya ba bam bam bim bam. Ya na 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 na, ya ba bam bam bim bam.
ונאמר אדוני את יעקב, וקרא מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים. Spread the shelter of your peace over us. Guide
page 162, ושמעו. ושמעו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמעו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם.
ושמעו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני, את השמיים ואת הארץ.
ושמעו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש.
ושמעו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמעו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
Please rise as we continue with the Amidah, beginning on page 164.
Adonai sebatai tivta, ufi ayite indatecha. Baruch ata Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham ve'Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah ve'Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah, האל הגדול הגיבור הנורא, העליון, גומר חסדים טובים וחונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו ואהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם, אתה גיבור יעלם אדוני, מחיים איתי מטרה וחושייה, משיב אור מוריד הגשם, מסריח השמש ומוריד הזהב, מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיים איתי ברחמים רבים, זורם נופים ורופא חורים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני אחת, ניחמו חבל גיבורות, ומיתו מלך, מלך ומיתו חייב, ומשמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה ליוצאים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. We continue individually through the balance of the Amidah through page 180. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'tzim yochadenu chaychenu v'tzetech samtzim v'tzecha Yal kulam yitbarach v'dumam shimcham b'chol. May the one who makes peace in the high heavens make peace for us, all Israel, and all who inhabit the earth. Amen. Should you have completed your individual prayers, please feel free to be seated.
Shalom bimrona, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Yayin lai lai lai. Yana lai 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 lai, yana lai 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 lai, yana lai 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 lai, yana lai 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 lai, yana lai 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 lai. Oseh shalom bimrona, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Oseh shalom bimrona, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru,
I'm going to be sharing a few texts with you today, and I'm wondering whether those seated in the rear might be willing to come forward if I were to ask you on bended knee, or short of that, nicely, it would be so much easier, I think, to convey the meaning of the text if we were here sharing it, and I only have a certain number of copies too. It would be really lovely if you wouldn't be too off-put. Can I ask somebody who'd be kind enough to help pass along some of the copies here? Thank you very much, Ta. Maybe a couple for those on the bima. It's a joy to be back in the community. I want to acknowledge and to give thanks to Cantor for leading the way in my absence, and to all those on the collaborative musical team, those who assembled for our pop-up Shabbat. All good. Glad to be back, and I hope everyone's enjoying this beautiful, beautiful summer's day. I've been receiving any number of comments since composing and publishing both in our weekly newsletter and in the UPJ newsletter, a reference to Paul Harvey. Does anybody know the name Paul Harvey? Paul Harvey broadcast on the radio for as many as 57 years. He put together 3,000 programs. And his programs focused, as my short 300-word blurb went on to say, the rest of the story. He had a very distinctive rhythm and timbre to his voice. He was a midrashist, that is to say, he was a storyteller. He was always looking more deeply at the people and the events of our day, and often looking into the past. I shared this improbable character, Paul Harvey, because as we approach this new narrative in Sefer Shemot, in the book of Exodus, if we're to derive much meaning from it, we too have to go deeper and see the rest of the story. To see not only when and what, as we have long known, but to delve into it further and to see how and why. And tonight, I've prepared a shiur which I call the rest of the story, Midrash and Magic. And look together with you at 3, maybe 4 different episodes that appear just in the first 5 chapters of the book of Exodus. The first episode is the ominous beginning that a melech chadash, a new king, arose over Egypt. So, what is the rest of the story behind this? For this, we're going to turn to the classical Midrash, which was composed in the early centuries of the Common Era, where the Gedolim, the great sages and teachers of our people, weigh in. In the first instance, from Midrash Tanchuma Buber, Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana said, "New? Was he really a new king? And in what way was he new? What might we answer? Well, the old king died and the new king arose." That's Peshat. That is to say, that's the straightforward and most sensible answer. But the Midrash goes on to say he was only new in the sense that he issued new decrees, opening the door and to suggest what? It might well have been the same king, but he took a different tact. Okay? The second episode I want to share with you is taken from only a very short couple of psukim or verses later in that chapter. We're going to read the text aloud, and as we do so, I want to invite you to consider what questions arise out of these verses. Because asking the question is the beginning of inquiry. As it says, the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah, and the other was Puah, saying, "When you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live." The midwives, fearing God, did not do so as the king of Egypt had told them, They let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this thing, letting the boys live? You've contradicted the law of the land." The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous. Before the midwife can come to them, they have given birth." "Never mind, I'll do it myself," they said. And God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and increased greatly. And God established households for the midwives because they feared God. Okay, so what sorts of questions might we have about these verses? Don't fear to speak up. Brenda?
I wonder why they're actually named. It's very certain that they're not named.
Very interesting observation. That's a very good question, and we're going to have an answer to it in a few minutes. Any other questions that arise out of it? Why did he want the boys killed? That's a very good question. Doesn't that seem oddly counterproductive? If the Hebrew slaves are building his store cities, amongst other things, why would you depress the number of your workers going forward? Right? Moses wouldn't have been born had these decrees been acted upon. Right. Let's look and see what the Midrash, this on Kohelet Rabbah, the book of Ecclesiastes, says. And consider what it is that the Midrashist finds most interesting in the account. Rabbi Yehuda says, Miriam and Yocheved were the midwives of the Israelites. Who are they? Of course, the sister and the mother of Moses. As it is written, the name of one was Shiphrah and the name of the second was Puah. This is not kimuvan. It's not completely clear that this is who they were. It doesn't say in the text of the Torah that these are who they were, right? Shiphrah, the Midrash adds, this is Yocheved, Moses' mother, who would tend to Mishaperet the children. Alternatively, it was because she procreated. And how do they come to this conclusion? Even without knowing the meaning of the Hebrew, we can conclude that there is something in the shorish and the root letters of Shiphrah that are related to these understandings. That is, that she improved in some fashion the children. Shipara v'rava. Shiphrah was one who brought about procreation, not in every instance personally. She gave birth to Moses at the age of 130. Ho ho! A new record. Alternatively, it is because the Israelites procreated due to her, presumably due to her zechut, to her merit. Alternatively, it is because they bettered the Israelite women with mitzvot and good deeds, with ma'asim tovim. So the rabbis are taking this opportunity to promote this basic Jewish principle of Torah and mitzvot and ma'asim tovim. It was by their merit that this plan succeeded. Another way of seeing Shiphrah is as praise of her character. With his breath, the heavens were calmed, Shiphrah. If you're familiar with Hebrew, this text means a little bit more, but still it is the assertion of the rabbis that these weren't just, first of all, they weren't Egyptian midwives working for the Hebrews, but they were really Hebrews. And not just any Hebrews, they were Miriam and Yocheved, who had a vested interest in averting this decree. Puah becomes Miriam in the rabbinic understanding, for she would make a comforting sound, po'ah, to the woman, and the child would emerge. She was like a Svengali. Alternatively, Pua, as she would cry, Po'a, and weep over her brother Moses, who was cast into the Nile, as it says his sister stood at a distance. And then it goes on to use other iterations of the Hebrew to relate them to Miriam. None of it may necessarily be convincing. We don't have to agree with the rabbis. We need to engage with the rabbis. And then there is introduced a beautiful Mishnah where it says, Shanu Rabotenu, it is taught that a person nikar b'shlosha shemot. A man is called by 3 names, one that one's parents gives, one by which that person is known to others, and one that that person is called in the book of his lineage. In the book of his lineage. What does that mean? Yes, it could be the name, son of this person, child of that person, whatever might be the case. I've imagined this to mean that this is the way that one is known in history. One will be known for some time to come, not as a contemporary. But what I think is more interesting than any of those answers is the fact that they use this discussion about the midwives to talk about what does it mean to be a person? What sort of name do you wish to acquire for yourselves? And by doing so, they really extend the text dramatically. It doesn't follow automatically or logically, but it gives them the opportunity to teach about what kind of person do you want to be? How do you hope to be known to others? I think it's very interesting. Moses, having been rescued from the Nile and raised in Pharaoh's palace, and according to the Midrashes, we've learned, weaned by his mother, goes out and witnesses the suffering of his people. Let's hear the rest of the story. That is, the Midrashists have to answer this question. How did Moses, who enjoyed affluence and comfort and security, have such affinity towards the suffering Israelite slaves? What does it have to do with him when so many others were indifferent to their plight? And I'm taking you now to chapter 2, to a very interesting passage. It says that Moses came upon an Egyptian taskmaster lashing or punishing a Hebrew slave. And it said he looked ko vacho, he looked both this way and that way, as we now know, before he set about to act in the Israelites' defense. Why did he look this way and that? It doesn't say he was crossing the street. You have to look to the right, you have to look to the left. What is the significance of this looking? He's looking to see if anyone would intercede. Any other possible? He was noticing. This is the same Moses who later, his attention is drawn to that sneh, that burning bush. He's obviously a very attentive person. He might have been looking this way and that because he was afraid if he acted, he might be killed, he might be caught, he might be held responsible. In the Haktav HaKabbalah, it says, Moshe thought that one of his Hebrew brothers in the area would rise up against the Egyptian and save him. He thought that this is not really my job, first and foremost. You'd think that the Israelites around him, the Hebrew slaves, would react, but they didn't. Likewise, there's the question, and he saw no ish, he saw no man. also from chapter 2, verse 12. What does it mean that he saw no man, no ish? Okay, no one else is going to do it. I'm going to do it. That is, it says here, he saw that there was no one of any courage. Not one of them took his brother's travail to heart to try and save him. So again, it implies a criticism or a question about the Hebrew slaves. Were they so demoralized? Were they so distant? Were they so afraid? Maybe they were afraid. Regarding this, the Midrash says that he looked not to others, not to determine whether he might be caught, but he looked to a heavenly entourage. And he saw that there was no man around. So in Dafka here, he saw that there were no people, but that doesn't mean to say there weren't some other kind of being there. But angels he saw, and he consulted with them. And by means of illusion that he saw himself, that he himself was no one but an angel. I'm sure his mother would have agreed. And he struck him with the spiritual power that was within him. And regarding this, our sages say that he struck him with the explicit name. That his power came not from his own physical being, but from an indignity that was aroused through his godliness or his belief. Interesting. That's a great question. How did he know he was Jewish? Or did he know that he was Jewish? Was he acting out of conscience, or was he acting out of brotherhood, in a sense? Did anyone want to say? Respond? So I think the answer to that question might, but only might, come from this notion that he was weaned and cared for in the home of his mother and his sister. That's what we find in the earlier Midrash. Yes, Lori? That's right.
Pharaoh's daughter meant her to be the wet nurse, and therefore
That's right. So the Midrash goes on to say, how is it came to be that this baby who's found in a basket in the Nile ends up with Miriam and Yocheved? Because she didn't know what to do with the baby that is the daughter of Pharaoh. Miriam's there and says, I've got somebody who could look after this for you. Very clever, a Yiddish cup. And so, is it possible then that that's the way he had within him that special neshama that came to life at that moment? And the question that I think then that we have to go with then is, how important is a child's early education to establishing a lifelong identity as a Jew? That's right. Yeah, okay. See, that's really part of the rest of the story. So, in the interest of time, so Moshe goes on the lamb. Not the Lamb, but on the lamb. He flees to the desert and is seen to rescue the shepherdesses of Yitro, one of whom he fancies so much he goes on to marry. Moshe is identified in the text as an Ish Mitzri. How curious. He's described as an Egyptian man. And I'm interested to know what meaning, if any, the commentary finds in this description. Here's the text from chapter 2, verses 19 through 21. An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. The girls say to their father, he even drew water for us and watered the flock when we were threatened. He said to his daughters, did Yitro, where is he then? Why did you leave him? Ask him in to break bread. Moses consented to stay with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Tzipporah as wife. How did they come to the conclusion that he was an Egyptian person, an Egyptian man? It says, Al inyan levishato ve'al halashon hikiru oto ki mimitzrayim hu. They could tell this by virtue of his clothing and his language. Okay. Later on, and very nearly to the end of our work here, it says, Ish Mitzri, he was a distinguished Egyptian. Moses had deliberately dressed as an Egyptian, seeing that he was fugitive and had to mislead his pursuers. And there is a comment in the Midrash that Moses, who had allowed others to think of him as an Egyptian, did not merit to be buried in the Holy Land, whereas Joseph, who had proclaimed the fact that he was a Hebrew, even when it could have hurt him socially and career-wise, did merit to be buried in the Holy Land. How tangential is this? Where does this come from? What do we know about Moses? Is he doesn't get to cross into the Eretz Yisrael. Why? Well, that's right, he hit the rock, but it's apparently not the only reason. One is he didn't represent as he should have, as a Hebrew, like Joseph did under somewhat similar circumstances, that is, living in Egypt. Now, I see some dubious expressions. You're not comfortable with that, and that's okay. Finally, we've come to a thorny issue. What are the questions that arise out of the following and last texts? Moses, tending the flock of his father-in-law, drove the flock into the wilderness, the Midbar, and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. A messenger of God appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. He gazed, and there was a bush all aflame, yet the bush was not consumed. Moses said, I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight. Like we said earlier, he's a very attentive fellow. Why doesn't this bush burn up? When God saw that he had turned aside to look, God called to him, Moses, Moses. He answered, Hineni. This is the language of Abraham. I'm here, I'm ready. It's the language of Isaiah. And God said, do not come closer, remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. So first of all, what are the questions? Why isn't the bush burning? Why a bush? Fantastic. How can God speak? Why and how could God speak out of a bush? But why a bush is a very good question of all things. And we take that up here. Maybe you've been reading ahead. It says, Mitoch hasneh, out of the midst of a bush, that is a thorn bush, and not from any other tree. In accordance with the idea, I will be with him in trouble. What does a thorn bush connote? Difficulty. It's a prickly situation, a thorn bush is. And he's in a lot of tsuras, isn't he, Moses? So what a better thing to talk to him out of is a thorn bush. But it gets better. Out of the burning bush, mitoch hasneh, the reason that God chose this bush, not George Bush, not George Bush Jr., not George Bush Sr., to reveal himself. Why did he reveal himself in this? That one could not construct a deity or symbol out of a bush. It wasn't likely to become a sacred icon of some sort. Right. Yeah, so that's all part. We could make midrashim on this. Right, beautiful. So let me conclude, and thank you very, very much for sharing this with me. I like this. I find this all very interesting and exciting. So thank you for going along with me today. Rav Yosef says this from the Talmud, Masechet Sota. A person should always learn proper behavior from the wisdom of God. As the Holy One, blessed be He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, disregarded all of the mountains and hills and rested His presence on Har Sinai, on Mount Sinai, similarly, when appearing to Moses, He disregarded all of the beautiful trees and rested the divine presence on the bush. Now, what's the next sentence? What's the rest of this story? Parenthetically, what happens next? What do we learn from this about Basar Vadam, about each of us and our relationships with other people? Because that's what it's about. The Torah isn't just a historical document to find out what happened when. It's about what is God speaking to us to consider, inviting us to think about. If anybody want to give it a shot? Right. Life isn't a beauty contest, that there is much to be found in the lowly and the humble, and the simple, making meaning. And I understand, I have long understood this text to say that there are a lot of people who are disregarded and dismissed, like that bush, but for the fact that Moses turned aside to take note of it. It would have been lost to history. And I think that what this is saying is that God's voice didn't appear in something grand. Even the Sinai was a lowly plateau, reminding us to be aware of the divine and even in every person, no matter how simple, poor, humble, modest that person might be. And that, to me, is a profound story. Okay, so thank you very much again. We're going to continue now on page 586. You haven't changed the pages on me since I left
No, not
last
yet,
month?
no.
Okay.
I wanted to, but no, didn't get
Okay.
it.
Please rise.
עלינו לשבח אדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגופי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו לעד.
אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
ונאמר,
והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא.
ביום ההוא,
יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. We remain standing as we recall those who have passed away within recent days, within the past month, and whose yortzites occur at this season. We mark the passing of Pearl Tritel, Peter Prager, Susan Rosario Chan, Irina Gershkoff, and Donald Schauder. And we mark the Shloshim of Charlotte Grace Dunn, Nathan Jacobson, Stanley Landau, Walter Glazer, Yanina Greenwood, Douglas Simons, Stan Gore, Joe Stupel, Matthew John Ellis, and Abraham Firestone. We remember the yortzites for Rebecca Abrahams, Serene Bayer, Sophie Bentata, Samuel Victor Cohen, Ben Cohen, Kenneth Dallin, Roma Fry, Israel Jacob Gluckstein, Betty Goldsmith, Vera Hewitt, Israel Jacobson, Martha Jacobson, Sam Kahn, Sam Klein, Cecil Pincus, Sidonie Pollock, Joseph Morris Richard, Eichel Schwartz, Lawrence Sharp, Dr. Coleman Starr, Louis Tobias, Lena Varone, Omer Vleskalik, Diana Wolf. Zichronam Livracha. May the memory of each abide as a blessing in the hearts of those who remember them now. Kaddish is recited on page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal. Shemei dekudesha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. I wanted to tell you this morning, I spent 4 hours together with members of our staff and together with Cantor and Michelle as we plotted a program for 2023, and I could not be more excited. There is so much ahead, culturally, educationally, spiritually, socially. It's going to be a full course year, and I hope that you're hungry because it's going to be great. Starting already in February, for those who would like to participate in the Purim Spiel, the choir rehearsals will begin already on the 1st of the month. Pride Shabbat, a tradition in our congregation already for many years, will follow over the course of the weekend, February 3rd through 5th. The Tribe program, an introductory program of Jewish studies open to absolutely everyone, resumes at 7:30 on the 7th. I'm so proud to be teaching what is a group of nearly 30 learners, and I invite anybody who would like to participate. We're emphasizing, too, in 2023, Hebrew literacy, if for no other reason than we're going to celebrate Israel's 75th birthday this year. So we got to get our Hebrew up to scratch. And I'll just foreshadow one last thing. On the 26th of this month is the first in a series we call the Kosher Supper Club. So we're going to go hopping around the city and joining at various kosher restaurants for dinner and socializing. It's going to be great fun and very filling fare, I'm sure, as well. Karen, would you like to come up and just to give your greetings on behalf of the board?
Thank you, Rabbi. Good evening and Shabbat Shalom. I'd like to welcome everybody here to Friday night service, those both in the sanctuary and those online this evening. I hope you have a lovely Shabbat and you manage to keep cool and hydrated over the Shabbat this week. So thank you very much for coming. Could you please remember to thank the CSG staff on the way out when you leave, and to please not to congregate on Alma Road and to leave swiftly. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Karen. Perfect. All right. Let's make a beautiful kiddush, and please rise. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael. Oops, that's for Shabbat morning. Yom Hashishi, Vayechodu Hashemayim v'aretz v'chol tzavam, Vayechal Elohim b'yom hashvi'i mikol malachto asher asa, Vayishpot b'yom hashvi'i malachto asher asa, Vayivarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i vayikadesh oto, Ki vo shavat mikol malachto asher bara Elohim lahasot. Savri chavorai. Let's hear it. L'chaim.
Chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kadesho b'ahava uv'ratzon inchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reshit, ki hu yom techila l'mikra'ei kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta v'otanu kidashta mikol amim b'shabbat kodshecha b'ahava uv'ratzon hinechaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. Good Shabbos to everyone. We'll join you in the back. We can give our greetings. Shkoach to Ido, to Ellie, and to Sharon.